Hey everybody, we're Shayem and Chris, and this is Fan Team Radio. And we're back. It's a late posting, but we're back after a really bizarre Brazilian Grand Prix. Chris, what's up?
Yeah, crazy weekend. A little bit late. I was on a holiday. And before we get started, though, I just want to talk about something real quick. Kind of global news. Things have been kind of going around the world. And Valtteri Bottas is out of Sauber. I'm a little sad. So
I really didn't know which way you were going to go with that. I thought you were going to talk about the election, but you teed it up perfectly.
Was there an election? No. Valtteri, my life is over. No, man. Yeah, Valtteri, I just wanted to give a shout out early on to him before we got too deep in the weeds, because this was a crazy weekend. And we'll get more about Valtteri in a minute. But yeah, this was probably the best race of the season. And, some people calling it a generational race. So, crazy all the way starting from sprint was good. I just hope that it continues to rain every weekend from now on in Formula One forever.
Yeah, I mean, I have so many thoughts on this. I don't know if it's a generational race or if every time it rains, we're just going to have to account for the fact that whatever we thought was going to happen is not going to happen.
Yeah.
It's like a scramble. It's almost like the Squid Games this past week.
Yeah, I mean, listen, so much happened. Even in the sprint race, we had, I don't know if you were able to catch it or not, but McLaren was showing, again, signs of their kind of inability to manage being in a championship race. There was.
Do you think it's a mismanagement of them being in a championship contention, or is it mismanagement of two drivers who could potentially be world champions, and then them putting their resources behind one a little too late?
Yeah, but it sounds like according to Lando's radio communications, his team radios, it sounded like they had talked as a team beforehand about what would happen and how it would happen, and they sort of diverged from that. And they even, which is crazy, they publicly said over the radio that they wanted to swap positions on the last lap when anything could happen. There was tons of people were having issues all over the track. If you have a red flag or a yellow flag, they can't overtake, they can't swap positions. And Charles and Max were closely catching up to Lando the whole time. Let Lando swap, build a gap, have Oscar sort of back them up a little bit, and give Lando that free air to go off into the distance.
I mean, I think that was the plan, and then Lando just took it on himself to open up the gap and maybe make Lando sweat it a little bit, which I totally agree with.
Yeah, so I mean, just overall, I felt it was sloppy, and it could have backfired on them, but ultimately it didn't, and they were able to make that swap. But in the wise words of Lewis Hamilton from 2021, there were so many moments this weekend where it felt like it was manipulated in Lando's favor and in McLaren's favor. And, it was actually said by multiple of the announcers on F1 TV. They were just like, I don't really understand this. It doesn't make a lot of sense. Obviously, Red Bull, went nuts about it. But it was just one of those things where there was a lot of decisions made over the weekend that didn't make sense, that allowed in McLaren's favor. And, from a layman's perspective, it might look like, they're trying to make the title race as close and exciting as possible to get down to Abu Dhabi. Lo and behold, that, ultimately backfired at the end of the day. But
at the end of the week, yeah. I completely am behind Oscar Piastri just putting everyone's, butts to the fire. This dude left Alpine where he could, granted Alpine was kind of a shit show, but he didn't know that yet. He left Alpine thinking that he'd be a considerable kind of driver pairing with Lando, which he is, but then now he's getting punished for it almost, right? And I understand the fact that if you have a team has to get behind one driver to vie for the chip, but and and Max has been a benefactor of this. Lewis has been a benefactor of this. A lot of D1 drivers have been benefactors of their D2 drivers backing them up. But in this situation, it just seems like they're trying to manufacture a situation where Norris can kind of win the chip by any means necessary. But it's just been kind of done in a way that it's sliding or siding, Oscar to the side. I don't know. What I'm thinking is that going into 2025, if McLaren can't get their shit together and Oscar just puts them in a place where they have to support him because he's just kind of outpacing Lando, that is something that could internally combust that team because then Lando just doesn't seem like the kind of guy that can take a back seat, especially after all the time and commitment that he's put into
Yeah, 100%.
McLaren. So McLaren's in this weird situation where they got a car that's more than more than enough to compete as the championship car. They have a management style that more or less works. It's like it's a committee styled type of setup that they have, which seems to work. But then now it seems like the drivers are their biggest issues, which this time last year, Chris, that was the complete opposite. It seemed like the drivers were in place to be probably one of the best driver pairings on the grid. Management was in flux, and the car was in complete shambles. So it's weird that the head turn that this team has taken, and I'm curious to see what the fallout's going to be in 2025. But I know you also wanted to talk a little bit about quality, so let's just maybe start there because there's a lot that stemmed from quality. After sprint going into quality.
Yeah, I mean, like quali was, obviously the first day it was rained out, so they delayed it to the following morning, which ultimately probably threw a lot of people off kilter. And it was still wet track. They had to wake up super early in the morning. I think it was like 4 a.m. or something like that when they had to get up and start preparing for quali. And they had, the track was, I think it was repaved at some point, and there was just a lot of new aspects to this track with the rain. A lot of people complaining about bumping and things like that, and there was multiple trouble spots on this track, and ultimately that led to 5 red flags during quali, which completely changed the pecking order that was, probably expected before going into the weekend. We had, Colapinto crash out in Q1. His teammate also in Q3, Albon, which we'll talk about later, the ramifications of that. Sainz had trouble all weekend, crashed out in Q2. Same with Stroll and Alonso. So both Williams and both Astons out in quali, creating a huge effect on the grid and the way it went around. But again, I'm just going to touch a little bit on this manipulation tactics from the FIA, because when Stroll crashes out, they don't throw the flag. They don't throw the VSC or the red flag or whatever it is. He's on the side of the road until Lando is able to complete his lap. And as soon as Lando crosses the line, they throw the red flag. And the only person that it really messes up is Max. So Max has to abort his lap and not set it, and ultimately ends up, instead of being able to get P6 or P5 and then taking his penalty and starting in the top 10, that's how he ends up at P17. And it just didn't make any sense that there was no flag called for like 30 seconds.
But Chris, you're missing the important point here.
What's the important point?
That any of them dropped the F-bomb.
Oh, man. You know what? I don't remember, because Charles Leclerc.
Because that's what racing's all about. Did someone drop an F-bomb and need to be fined?
Yeah, and make sure they're wearing the right underwear and jewelry as well. I don't know if you saw that thing Vettel put out, but he basically wrote a letter. But I just, ultimately I get it. Formula One's a business, it's a sport, whatever like that. And I don't follow enough other sports closely to know if there's a lot of similar situations.
You can't get away with that in American sports. It's just way too well governed, and the governing body is across 30 plus owners, And I think when you have a sport where relatively the entire I guess Mohammed bin Salam would be like the figurehead, but then there's a lot of other like invisible hands in the pot. With the NBA, with the NFL, to a certain extent, the MLB, all the owners, like they're the one that are hiring the association to govern for them. So I think there's a equilibrium that that structure naturally takes, where fairness is going to it's in everyone's best interest to be fair. But when you have one figurehead who you don't know if he's in bed with like not with sponsors, but with like the governing body, right? And the governing body is pretty hard to kind of pin down who all these people are. And then you have stewards that are essentially temps, and there's no consistency. I mean, you can manipulate it as much as you want, right? It's just it's more akin to what soccer was probably like in the late '80s, early '90s, where there's just a bunch of different, and still to this day, right? Just a bunch of different um, uh, points of contention that keep coming up, but then no one, there's no one to actually focus in on them. So yeah, I mean, to your point, you quoting Lewis, and him saying everything's being manipulated, like we've brought this up a lot on this pod, Chris.
I mean, we've literally been talking about the rules and the way the FAA has mismanaged them since we started this podcast 2 years ago. I mean, like like they just, and we've said this a million times, so we're not going to have to say it too many more times because otherwise we're just beating a dead horse. But they just need to create a set of rules that can be referenced in any situation. Like, for instance, if there's a red flag called after a yellow flag, a single yellow, double yellow, whatever like that, they should just go back to the point of the incident and say, we'll take the situation as was at that point, because therefore a red flag should have been called at that moment. And anybody who did anything in between, it goes back. So like if people cross the finish line, set lap times and quality, those are negated because it would have been a red flag or should have been a red flag. Maybe there's situations where that doesn't work out. I'd have to think about it, but some like,
I mean, let's step away from quality and actually go into the race. Even during the pre-race laps, when Norris had a start infringement, and then I think George also had, I mean, the two cars that followed him, it took literally until halfway through the race for them to say anything about like what kind of punishments. And then they eventually said that they're going to wait till the end of the race to dole out those punishments for infringing the start of the formation laps. I'm like, I understand sometimes when the race is happening, everything's going on too fast, but it's a starting lap. Like it's a formation lap. Like if someone starts before the light turns green, that shouldn't be such a hard, you know, like they should be able to immediately address that situation and administer the penalties that are associated with that specific. I just don't get it. Like let's just go into the race, Chris. So,
but like to your point though, but this is what we're talking about. Like I get the FAA announcers or the F1 announcers basically said that, the race is going on now. They have to like go back and review the tapes and they're busy doing other stuff. First of all, there should be enough people who can review this stuff. There should be like a set of people who can review that aren't the fucking decision makers and just doing it and be able to make decisions on the spot. However, they shouldn't even have to. It should be you exit your box, you cross the fucking start line before the light screen. That's a penalty. Like, why do you need to review? Anyways, ad nauseum again, but most people were saying that, if Max had done that, there would have been a harsher penalty than just a little bit of a fine. And, that's the kind of discrepancies that we need to get out of the sport. Moving on, we'll move into the race.
Let's go into the race.
The race that Stroll did not participate in for starting that formation lap.
Yeah, he spun out almost immediately. It's almost like he's like, hey, I just don't want any part of this. Just spun out immediately. Albon didn't even start.
With how bad Fernando's back was hurting at the end of this race, I could totally see Lance being like, "Hey, man, I'm not even this car. I'm not. I don't want to race it. Oh, I'm just going to park it in this wet gravel." Like, what was that?
I mean, he deserves to be on he deserves to be on the grid. Okay, so let's break this down. So Max had an incredible race. So let's kind of walk through that real quickly, and I'm going to do it in contrast to Perez's lackluster race. So Max gets off the line fairly well. He's kind of making his way through in lap one. I think Russ gets a really, really good lead. So Perez spins out almost immediately, going into I think like turn 4 or 5 on lap one. So he's pretty much near the back of the pack already. By lap two, Verstappen goes from P17 all the way up to P10. Just an amazing outside move. Like I like Alex Jacks and the commentators really harped on like that move that he made just within the first 2 laps, going around the outside on wets, super ballsy, but he's got the gumption to do it. By lap 5, Verstappen goes into P9. By lap 16, he's closing the gap to Leclerc for P6. Or sorry, he's in P6 and he's closing the gap to Leclerc for P5. By lap 22, he's closing the gap even more and attempts to do the overtake for P5. And then, lucky for him, by lap 25, Leclerc pits for inters. Verstappen goes into P5. By lap 32, Colapinto crashes, which incites a safety car, a red flag. So the order then becomes Ocon, Verstappen, Gasly, Norris, Russell, Tsunoda. So Verstappen is now in P2. He maintains that position for quite a while, and then in lap 42, he actually overtakes Ocon for P1. Norris goes off the road. Don't know what the hell's happening with him. Piastri overtakes Norris, so that delta between Max and Norris just increases even more. And then Verstappen, from lap 42 all the way to the end of the race, just maintains a steady lead. I mean, what was it, Silverstone back in 2022, Chris, that Hamilton did a similar thing, or 2021, where Hamilton did a very similar thing where he came from the back of the pack and just was able to just get around everyone.
Well, he did it at this track too.
Yeah, he did in Brazil too. Yeah,
wasn't
it
it this
wasn't
track?
raining. It wasn't. Yeah, it wasn't raining then though.
Yeah, but that was the sprint race where he got like went from P20 to P1.
No, I think that was an actual race, Chris.
Well, no, he went from P20 or whatever to P1 and then got a 10-spot grid penalty.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
And so he basically made up 30 places over the 2 qualification / races. And the insanity of that was crazy. But yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, at the end of the day, Perez throughout the entire time was essentially fighting to, by lap 21, Perez was in the back, and I think the only 2 cars behind him were Bottas and Joe. And then he's fighting Lawson the entire time to get back into somewhat of a respectable grid position. But I think it's just a good, perfect illustration of the delta between Max Verstappen and Checo Perez, and why it's prompting Red Bull to potentially give Yuki Tsunoda a test race in Abu Dhabi, which we'll talk about in just a second. But what are your thoughts on Max's race? What are your thoughts on Perez's race? Let's just start there.
Yeah, there's 2 videos that got posted to some of the social medias about the juxtaposition of Verstappen versus Perez. The first one is the start, which if you watch it from Perez's perspective, Perez just doesn't have any racecraft. He's not trying to make moves. Like, he's being very, very cautious. And then you see Verstappen come and pull that outside move, and you literally can watch him gain a ton of places. Like, Max just has so much confidence in the car and so much ability. He knows the limit at every moment. And I think he got props from just about half the drivers on the grid, just about. He's able to do things in that car that we're just not able to do. And I think
speak for yourself.
It was an amazing, it was an amazing thing to watch. But the other video I saw is not necessarily related to the race, but it was during, I think, sprint quali, and they're sitting in the pit lane, and there's like a bunch of cars piled up in the pit lane, and Sergio's race engineer is like, we need to get a hustle on. You need to get the lap in now. But he can't get it. He's like, I can't get around these guys. He's like, no, just overtake them. He's like, well, they're not going to let me. He's like, no, overtake them. And Perez again says, well, I would, but they're not going to let me. And then right as he says that last moment, Verstappen overtakes Perez and all the cars in the pit lane at like full speed. And it's just like one of those things. It's like, dude, just fucking do your job. Like, he just doesn't seem to be all there or have that same awareness and skill set and the things that Verstappen knows what to do. So like this race was a perfect example of the difference between Max and Perez, and the Constructors' Championship shows the results of that. So I'm hoping that they finally, and like you said, we'll talk about Yuki in a minute and Liam and all the other options, but I really hope that they finally take matters into their own hand and take Perez out of the equation, because you see what the Red Bull can do on this track in the wet, and Perez did not do that. So
I mean, the only spot left on the grid is that D2 driver for VCarb, which Liam's occupying for the time being, but officially has not been given to him just yet. Um, let's before we go into the whole Yuki situation, let's talk a little bit about how Norris kind of just hands the chip almost over to Max Verstappen in this one race. We touched on the controversial kind of way that McLaren handled the driver positioning within the sprint race to try to put any kind of resources behind Norris to collect those P1 points in the sprint. But that all kind of came undone due to Norris himself. I can't imagine Oscar Piastri being in that race being like, this is what I gave up a sprint win for. Is this guy like essentially jumping the gun during the start of the formation lap? And then Oscar had his couple of times where he almost spun out, but Norris was really going off track a couple of times in that race. And I don't know, as someone who's I guess more of a Piastri fan than I am a Norris fan, I was mad for Oscar. I was like, this is, you wouldn't expect this out of Norris. He essentially hands the race over to Verstappen. What do you think? Do you think that this is just an illustration of Norris being a subpar driver when compared to Max, or do you think this is just due to, it was just a one-off, and that it's not really indicative, or we shouldn't put too much thought into Norris's race this week?
well, I mean, ultimately the
I guess,
issue.
I guess you could also say that everyone's subpar when you compare them to Max, but the narrative so far has been, or at least the FIA's tried to been built up, is that Norris is just on par with Max. What do you think that's a fair assessment?
Well, I definitely don't think Norris is on par with Max. I don't even think he would. He's publicly said that he's not, and that Max is on another level. And I think other people on the grid, including Lewis, have said that Max is the best driver on the grid to date, which I I just think is undeniable. But ultimately Norris, I think he's a capable driver, and he has the skill set to be able to potentially be a champion if someone like Max isn't on the grid. I'd have to go back and watch the actual decision of the pit, because Norris ultimately lost out because they decided to pit him on lap 28 for new inters right before the red flag got called after Colapinto crashed and decided that the conditions were a little too dangerous. So, but why would you the fact that all the drivers, not all of them, but a lot of the drivers were calling for the red flag. Ollie Behrman was on the radio saying, this is dangerous. I'm not out here to die, man. You need to report the fact that these are unsafe conditions. So the fact that there's multiple drivers saying this, when I was watching
next year,
when I was watching the race, there was so much spray you couldn't see the cars coming down the main straight. I turned to my wife and was like, "This is insane!" I haven't actually seen them race in the wet of these conditions in a long time, and I actually thought they were going to call a red. So People are calling for red. I think there's going to be red. It almost seems inevitable with the amount of crashes and issues we're having. So why under a VSC do you pit when you ultimately know you could lose positions and then get a red flag and get screwed up? Now, that being said, I think Verstappen's pace, I think he would have won the race from any position anywhere. I mean, like I think he set the fastest lap 17 different times, and at the end of the race, he had 9 of the 10 fastest laps. At one point during the race, Charles Leclerc radioed to his engineer, "What's the fastest lap?" And his engineer's response was, "Don't ask." Like he was a second and a half off the pace. Like you're not going to get it. Max is the only one potentially possible. So ultimately, I think Max could have won even if Lando wasn't screwed over by the red flag. But the fact that they pit anyways, I just think, I don't know if it was Lando's decision or McLaren's. I'd have to go back and watch, but ultimately it just wasn't a good decision. Russell had the same thing happen, and Russell was furious at Mercedes for pitting it. So it's like, bro, like you're giving up track position and you know that these conditions are unraceable. So I think little things like that will just ultimately prevent Norris from getting his WDC until they're able to fix those situations. And he probably won't because Piastri's coming up and up next year. So,
I mean, I'll tell you who did want a red flag is Esteban Ocon. He wanted the race to stop right there and then,
stop the count.
Which leads me to Alpine. Is there a win a fluke, or is there podiums a fluke? Do you think this is something that just happened because of the rain? I don't want to call it a complete fluke. I think that there is some sort of credence to be given to the fact that they were able to, race a clean race and kind of keep both of their cars at the top of the pack, which is a really hard thing to do. So my hat's off to them. But Chris, come on. Under regular circumstances, do you think that this is going to be something that Alpine can pull out their ass?
No, I mean, but we've seen this before multiple times. I mean, when George Russell was in a Williams, in Hungary when Valtteri Bottas went bowling, I think that's the race that Ocon ended up winning the first time. Like when you have a wet track like this, there's a lot of things that take the aerodynamic advantages of other cars away, and it just becomes a strategy thing and ultimately like a driver thing. So I think the rain being the great equalizer is a fact. And all of a sudden we get put in a position where if you make strategy calls or you make mistakes, then you're going to lose out big time and other people are going to be able to capitalize. So I think that that's exactly what they did. Like they didn't pit when they could have and reaped the benefits of that. And, actually, this might be a good indicator, talking about the Yuki scenario. They're like, he was able to qualify P3. Maybe Yuki is a great driver and he's just stuck in this RB shitbox. And if he was in the Red Bull, he could eke out these P3s and stuff like that more often in dry conditions. So I think we saw a lot of people's like talent in the wet, shine through. Which definitely happens almost every time there's a wet race. We see a lot of mix-ups like this. So again, to your point, they're not going to do this in dry conditions. It's a team sport. The Alpine organization doesn't have their shit together and their car is just not up to snuff. But you can only get lucky if you put yourself in the position to be lucky. And, I think Gasly and Ocon are both capable drivers, and they're both good, and they've both race winners before and multiple podiums. So I think ultimately they had a good race. It probably won't be a regular thing, but I don't think that it was necessarily undeserved. So
I think if you looked at Vegas odds, they probably were like plus 800 to win to be double podium for this race.
Ocon pointed that out. He was like, "I hope someone bet on us and is filthy rich at this moment."
Yeah. All right, we talked about Yuki a little bit, so let's actually dive into it. So motorsports.com reports that Yuki Tsunoda is going to take the wheel of the RB20 during the end of season Formula One Abu Dhabi test. After multiple requests from the Japanese driver as he fights for a spot with the Austrian team in 2025, Christian Horner has confirmed the news. So, what does this tell you, Chris? Does this tell you that Liam could potentially take the D1 drive at VCarb? They boost Yuki up into RB at least for a testing period, throughout 2025, and then they kind of either demote Checo to the VCarb team, or they try to bring in Franco Colapinto. Like apparently, Williams is asking for a hefty sum for Franco Colapinto to go to any kind of Red Bull organization. But what do you think this Yuki testing at the end of the year is? What do you think that's indicating?
I honestly don't know. This is actually the first I heard about it. So my takeaway from this is probably going to be it's going to give Red Bull an excuse to not promote Yuki, to sort of be like, we tested all the drivers, X driver performed the best. We gave Yuki a shot. We gave Liam a shot. We gave Franco a shot. Whoever they're going to put up for the running for the seat. I guess if maybe Yuki shows insane performance, they consider it. But I don't think that he's up for consideration for the seat. There hasn't been any chatter about it. I'm sure they're just doing it as a courtesy for his dedication to the organization, being there for 3 years. And unless he just blows them out of the water, I don't see him potentially getting the seat.
But I think that right there, that just to have the opportunity to potentially blow them out of the water, it's the same opportunity they gave Danny Rick, and Danny Rick gave a lot of his time to the RB organization. I think because a couple of weeks ago, Chris, we were talking about how and multiple times actually over the last 2 years, we were talking about how they're just not taking Yuki seriously. They're just not even giving him a chance. But this is a chance, this is a 4 to 5. This is actual chance. Like if you could be undeniable, right, during testing an actual race week, I don't, that is a chance that not many other drivers get, and I think because Williams is kind of holding, I think they're asking like $20 million from Red Bull to loan out Franco to RB specifically. I'm not sure if that's the number that they're holding other teams to, because I know other teams have expressed interest in Colapinto. But playing this musical chair of RB VCarb drivers, I'm thinking it makes sense to keep. I mean, obviously keep Max where he is. Maybe have Liam take over the D1 driver position for VCarb, because Liam is now to your point in our last episode. I think he is now trying to just take command of a team, and whether that's fully deserved or not, that's up for debate. I am in the camp that it's not fully deserved just yet. I think it's the same shit that Nick DeVries tried to pull when he was trying to get into Williams, but I'm sorry, into VCarb, but this seems like a natural progression, right? As opposed to jamming a circle into a square peg, which is what they essentially did with the Danny Rick situation. I think this is more of a let's get some sort of data points on Yuki in a place where it really matters, and I think that's going to be it's better than what we were projecting the same time last year, right? That they're just not going to give. I think I even made a point that they're probably just don't take Asian drivers seriously, right? Like I was willing to take it to that extent, because all their actions were suggesting such. Now that Yuki is actually getting a test, I think it's maybe a move of desperation on Red Bull's behalf. Uh, but whether it's through desperation or by good faith, I still think that this is going to be a good thing for Yuki. I just hope that he actually, you know, gives them some undeniable, undisputable data on why he should be considered for the RB. The thing is, if Yuki shows up, has a great test, and they still don't promote him, then our concerns are I think are further validated that they just don't take him seriously, and they might just not take any Asian driver seriously.
Ultimately, though, it may just boil down to, and I think we've mentioned this before, Red Bull is a marketing company, and this is this phenomenon that I'm going to bring up has been happening across every industry that I know of. Like it's happening in Hollywood. It's happening like on multiple reality TV shows. Like, and the reason why Checo is still in the seat is, you know, popularity and ability to sell. And I think this is the reason why Red Bull is already willing, after a couple of races, to potentially part with $20 million to bring Franco Colapinto into the organization, because overnight this kid has had a massive like uprising to his socials. And I mean, there was people at the Sao Paulo track just like chanting Franco Colapinto, and he has a massive fan base already. So I don't think the performance maybe matters so much as like how many Red Bull cans can this person sell in their home country, or, you know, merchandise and things like that, because they already have Max. They have their golden boy. They have the guy who's going to win WDCs. And like, obviously they want Perez or whoever's in that seat to be a little bit more consistent and putting, you know, constructors championships up there. But they ultimately just may care about, let's get the most popular driver in this second seat because we're a marketing company. And I think that's probably ultimately what they care about. That being said, I don't know. But that may be one of the reasons why Yuki hasn't gotten it. I don't know what Yuki's following is like, but it just doesn't seem to be as, let's just call it as electric as, you know, Franco's or Checo's. I mean, you know, we were in Coda, Danny's 100%. So, but you know, people.
I think it is a sport that is it's almost a high fashion sport. You know, like you need to look the part, be the part. Uh, sorry, looking the part is a major factor of being the part in this sport. You know, and I think Yuki being, you know, was he 5'3", like just this little, like, you know, kind of like ball of frustration at certain times probably doesn't reflect the same way that you know, a young, like, kind of strapping guy like Franco Colapinto with like an Argentinian kind of following, like you know, it just, I guess, it does fit the mold for them on a marketing level. But I think that's a good jumping off point for the new Sauber driver, Chris. They announced Gabriel Bortoleto as the driver next to Hulk for Audi. And he got like a 2-year deal. So that's, I mean, you know, I haven't really heard too much about Gabriel Bortoleto, so it led me to kind of do my own kind of Wikipedia research. Brazilian driver, drives in F2 for Invicta. You know, this is straight from Wikipedia. So you guys, if you want to know where my sources are, just look up his Wikipedia. But you know, he graduated from the Junior Formula in 2020. Interestingly enough, he's the protege of Fernando Alonso. I don't know what the hell that means, but Wikipedia said it. He won his first title in 2023 in Formula 3. He's a race winner in an Italian F4. He entered F2 in 2024, and then he won from last place at Monza, and is considered to be the first driver either in F1 or F2 to do that. So the resume is not half bad. I don't know what the hell protege Alonso means, but again, he's a Brazilian, you know, South American driver, young, probably gives a good contrasting face next to someone like Hulkenberg, who, you know, has that tenure. Also, someone from like a very established Eastern European kind of. I think there's something to be said about British, Latin, and potentially like German, you know, like Swedish style like drivers. It seems like a sport that really promotes those kinds of drivers a little bit more than they do others. Like, and the reason I say that is because, you know, I listened to Karun Shandak, like his kind of uh, he had an episode on the race F1 where he was talking about how he was able to get himself wedged into F1 by leaps and bounds, you know, to have at least one season in F1. And I think, like, you know, whether it's Eastern Asian or South Asian drivers, maybe even like American drivers, it's kind of a sport where maybe they just aren't as heralded as like British Latin, Eastern European drivers are. I mean, I don't know how much I want to put behind that, but it definitely is an observation that I've made over the course of watching F1 for the last several years, and then also historically, kind of just taking a look back at previous popular drivers like Senna and Mika Hakkinen and Michael Schumacher. Uh, Hamilton, right? There's I think there's a cultural skew to the sport that because I watch American sports all the time, everyone's American, right?
Right.
Um, but yeah, I don't know. What are your thoughts on Gabriel Bortoleto like entering Sauber as a new driver? Do you think it's a good move on them? Do you think it was a calculated risk that they're taking? What are your thoughts?
He's replacing Valtteri, so he's dead to me, and I hate the guy.
Yeah,
No, I mean, listen, like you spoke about his resume, he definitely seems like another very capable driver. I mean, McLaren, I think he was a part of the McLaren organization, only let him go because he was able to get a full-time seat.
yeah,
And it's one of those situations. Um, you, I think we're seeing a lot of rookies come into the sport for a reason. Like
yeah.
there's a lot of talent out there, and we've had a lot of long-term tenured drivers in this sport. And I think leading up into 2026, all these organizations want to get these really high-profile rookies a year in an F1 car before starting under the new regulations. So I think it's definitely very calculated. There's also another reason. I'd have to go back and look at the exact quotes. But Mattia outlined of why the rookie was chosen over someone like Valtteri, and it's a good baseline for Hulkenberg to compare him against if they want to replace Hulkenberg for 2026. And because if you have Valtteri in the seat next to Hulkenberg and they kind of do a rinse and repeat of what they did this year, I mean, like, look at where the car's a tractor, right? So look at where Joe and Valtteri were. They were always in 1920 or like kind of in the same kind of zone at all times, never in the points. They never scored a point. So it's hard to really compare like who was doing what. And so if you have Valtteri in the seat next to Hulkenberg and they do the same thing, then you don't really know really where they are. But if you have a Hulkenberg next to a rookie and the rookie is destroying Hulkenberg, well, then you know that like it's time to get rid of Hulkenberg. And so I think it's just like a good baseline to compare their performance to of a rookie versus a very experienced driver. What are the differences? Where are they ending up? So I think so that's kind of how Mattia explained the reason why he wanted to go with a rookie. That being said, it's also probably for everybody's fighting for the next Max Verstappen, whether it's Kimi Antonelli or Liam or Franco Colapinto or
Jack doing.
that, by the way, did you see? I don't know if this is just bullshit, hearsay, whatever, but like there was a report that said Flavio Briatore changed his mind and could potentially swap Doohan out for Colapinto if they're able to get him. Could you imagine being Jack Doohan, getting an F1 seat and then losing it before the year starts? That would suck.
I,
But
I would set that facility on fire if I was Jack Doohan. I'd commit arson.
yeah, dude, like
That dude put in a lot of time. I mean, like whether he's good or not, that's left to be seen. But like, he's put in a lot of time, man hours into that Alpine organization, an Alpine organization that is quite frankly kind of shitty, and has really no definition for the last 2 years. Um, but Flavio Veritori himself also doesn't have a lot of flavor.
but like ultimately to wrap up some of this, like I'm excited to see all these rookies. Like obviously I'm going to miss Valtteri. The rumor is he's potentially going to be a reserve driver for Mercedes, so he's going to be replacing Mick standing behind Toto at every race, and I'll love seeing that. But
Yeah, I'd rather see Bottas back there anyways. I mean, nothing against Nick, but
That's another thing Benotto said. Somebody asked him why Bortoleto, and he said maybe we should ask Toto the same question: why Kimi and not Mick? I mean, people are giving Toto like so much shit because he's been saying for years about, oh, Mick deserves a seat. Mick deserves a seat. Well, we'll give him one then, Toto. But yeah,
Nah,
I'm just excited to
let's not
see all
do
these
that.
rookies. I think there's going to be a lot of young people making a lot of moves. Trying to earn their seat in F1, prove what they can do. And I think it's going to be a wake up call for just about everybody on the grid, not named Max Verstappen. So
Yeah,
I'm just
I mean, let's list off. So it's Liam Lawson, um, Antonelli, Jack Doohan, Ollie
all
Behrman, Gabriel
and,
Bortolotto,
and Franco
potentially
technically.
Franco. Yeah, so for like six drivers that are way younger than us, Chris, by a
Yeah,
lot. They were probably
way.
all born in. They're all born post 2001.
The moment I realized that people could be adults born after 2000 is the moment I became permanently sad. And
Yeah.
yeah, just like you said, I don't know how old Jack Doohan is, but
I think he's
yeah.
like 23.
Oh God. Anyways, the yeah, I'm just excited. I'm excited for it. I think it's going to be great.
Let me actually look
Yeah.
that up. I'm actually curious.
Technically, Ollie Behrman, by definition and rules, is not actually a rookie anymore. Now that he's had 3 races, but we're going to go ahead and call him a rookie. So, and by that definition, I guess Franco won't be a rookie either. But
Oh, dude, Jack Doohan is 21 years old. He was born in
oh
2000.
my Jeebus.
Yeah, yeah,
Uh,
it's nuts.
Speaking of being 21 years old, let's talk about winning and losing in life. So,
Yeah,
yeah, I mean, like, just recapping a little bit. Race was crazy. Loved it, every moment of it. I want to go back and watch it a couple times. But starting with my winners, obviously we have to say Verstappen. He broke a couple records. I think he's been doing that all year long, but he's the first person to win from 10 different spots on the grid. I think it is. He
yeah,
was tied with Fernando Alonso, and now he has the sole ownership of that, winning from P17. And ultimately, the pace was insane. Watching him just climb up the field, and then at the end of the race, there. Uh, um, why am I blanking on his engineer's name? GB, whatever his name is.
GP. Yeah,
Yeah, GP. Like, he was trying so hard to get him to like back off because it's still a really wet track. And he's like, yeah, 15 seconds max, please just bring it home safely. And then he's like, 16 seconds max, please. And then, a couple laps before the end, he's like, Max, you have 18 seconds. There's no threat here. And Max is like, oh yeah. I'll bring it home. And it's just like that lion fighting spirit, just to be like, I need to keep eking out more seconds, is just insanity.
yeah.
Great race by Max. I don't have any other more words for him. So good
I
race.
don't really either. Yeah, he's in my winner circle. It's just de facto. All right, I'll start the next one. Alpine. I think it's a fluke, but they did what they did. They're in the podiums. I don't know how the fuck that happened, but here we are today. We should have fucking man. I wish I could have got back in time and bet on that.
Maybe it gave them a moment of liking each other for 5 minutes before going back and wanting to maim each other. So,
Yeah,
small miracles. We'll see if it's a fluke, but ultimately, we'll see how Ocon does at Haas next year. And unfortunately, Gasly is going to be stuck in the Alpine organization probably permanently until his career's over. But I'm going to go ahead and say I want to put Yuki on here real quick, just because he did a really great performance qualifying P3, and he actually held on to that P3 spot for a good portion of the beginning of that race. I actually thought, being in the RB and being in the rain, Yuki has actually had lots of moments over his career where he's in good positions and he has an incident, like he goes off track or he locks up and goes into the runoff, or spins out and crashes. He's had that happen multiple times when he's been in high pressure situations. It's actually kind of what I expected to happen. I expected him to lose P3 pretty quickly and or crash in the wet by trying too hard. And he kept his composure and kept P3 and actually built a little bit of a gap. Before all the craziness and flags and things of that nature, and ultimately realizing the pace that Max truly did have, there was a moment where I actually thought we might see a Yuki podium today. Ultimately,
That would
that
have been
wasn't.
awesome. That would have been, yeah, that would have been slick.
I was literally mentally prepared to go nuts. Like I literally would have went nuts. But if this race is what got him a test, then it's a win for him, and so be it. And then lastly, I'm going to shout out the Kick Sauber pit crew, because multiple times at the beginning of this year, we were talking about 30 and 40-second pit stops, and they had fastest DHL, fastest pit stop of the weekend, fastest pit stop the whole weekend. Congratulations. You guys don't suck anymore. That's
Yeah,
all.
this was a weird fucking week. Yeah, man, we should have bet the spread on that one. All right, let's go. Let's go to losers. We actually have two sets of different losers for the first time in a while. So I'll kick it off. I think Williams was definitely losers this week. That was an expensive week for them. With Albon crashing out, with Colapinto crashing out the way they did, the look on their engineers' faces, I felt my heart sank for them. I don't think they even turned the camera to uh, what's her team principal's name? I'm losing my.
James Vowles.
Yeah, I just think that this was a horrendous weekend for them, and this had a lot of promise for Colapinto. He was putting the moves on Hamilton. He was kind of making his way up the track, but the rain they succumbed to the rain. And then I got Hamilton also in my loser circle. Typically really good in the rain, but he spun out a couple of times. He reported the car was bumpy, probably within lap 10 or something like that. Let me just fact check myself right there. Yeah, by lap 9, he's already reporting that the car is bouncing. So it's just was not his week. This whole week was rough on him. I'm just waiting for him to go to Ferrari, so I have something to look forward to next year. But yeah, those two are on my losers brackets, as the Williams and Lewis Hamilton.
I think Hamilton is right there with you. I think he's already mentally in the Ferrari, and we've seen signs of him, being a little crass with his engineering team.
Any pun there, Chris? Signs of him.
Any signs of him? Poor Carlos going to Williams. But I was actually going to bring that up, that this weekend was terrible for Sainz in multiple ways. I mean, he crashed in quality, crashed in the race, but then the organization he's going to took a big hit this weekend. Like, talk about, losing out a little bit. I have Sainz on my losers because
I guess what you mean is, we've all had instances where we can see ourselves failing, like in the present, but to see yourself potentially failing in the future, that's a different kind of depression. But he's handsome and a multi-race winner, so I'm not gonna.
Yeah, ultimately, in the grand scheme of life, Sainz is going to be fine. In the world of F1, I think he's going to have a pretty mentally rough year next year, and I hope when he finally leaves, he'll take it like Danny, because I don't know. I've seen Danny Rick a couple of videos, and he looks pretty happy lately. So hopefully that's all real. But then I'm gonna put Aston on the losers for a similar reason. Just expensive weekend. They had multiple crashes, and
did Lance really crash? He didn't really crash. He just kind of threw in a towel and spun out, and
he crashed during quali.
that's right.
Both him and Fernando crashed in quali, and they had to rebuild the car because quali was only a couple hours before the race, and that's the only reason why Fernando didn't call it quits. He actually wanted to, and he came over the radio and said that I'm going to finish this race for the engineers because they did an insane job putting this car, but he called a medical car after the race because his, obviously he's in his 40s. He's a little older, more akin to our age, but he they had ultimately a really bad weekend just in general, and they're in the losers column because they just had a crap weekend. Same as Sainz and Williams. But I'm going to put Williams on my hot seat for the same reason you have him in your losers, because I think this weekend was ultimately massively detrimental to them. And James Valios already came out and said that they're kind of already over the budget cap, and the amount of I don't think they can afford to make new parts, so they're going to be like digging in their spare parts from older specs to get them to get those cars built for the last remaining races. I don't know if it's in the rule book what you can and can't do, but I almost would just like throw in the towel and be like, we're not racing.
I think that violates some sort of rule. And if it doesn't, that Mohammed bin Salem is going to make one up on the spot.
Yeah,
hold him to it. I think this is a great chance for them to sell Franco Colapinto for $20 million. They really need the money.
Yeah, I literally was gonna say I think that's why the high price tag is like, man, we're broke. I need some money. Take this kid. So yeah, I think James Vowles, like he said, he was hurting pretty bad. Thank God they got rid of Logan Sargent when they did, so these crashes would stop. JK, but they, terrible weekend for them. We'll see what happens to them overall. I think it's going to be detrimental going into next year. I wish them the best. I know, I have high hopes for them, but Albon seems to be underperforming. Franco probably won't even be a part of that team. So, we'll see what happens. It's just bad weekend all over them for them overall. And I think we both have Perez for obvious reasons we've already talked about.
Yeah. I mean, Perez, this is kind of this might be the stamp on him, getting shown the door with this organization. Just completely stark contrast to Verstappen, which in some essence it's not fair to compare yourself with the best driver on the grid right now, right? But you got to at least keep it close, and he did not do that. And then the other person I have on my hot seat, other than Perez, is Lando Norris. Talk about a missed opportunity, and talk about shooting yourself in the knee. Right? It's just avoidable mistakes. Your team is behind you. Your D2 driver is reluctantly, behind you. Even but he's still behind you, right? Like they're all pushing for you, and you just kind of shit the bed. And I hate him.
I mean, not only did he shit the bed, but he kind of had a sour losing experience, like in the media, like telling everybody that Max's win was all luck based, and just like he just doesn't seem to have any kind of like grace to him, or like being able to admit his own mistakes and learn from them. Like he's just kind of a sore loser, and I
hate him.
I want to like him a lot. I just can't at the moment, and I don't know if I will, because Oscar's just so much more likable at the moment.
Yeah, Oscar's more likable, and I hope that they wisen up and put more resources behind him for 2025 and 2026.
Well, I don't think you have to worry about it at the moment, because it looks like Max would have to break his leg and die, and Norris would have to win the last remaining races for it to even be close, because I think there's like 20 different ways Max can, I don't know about that, but Max is very likely to clinch the championship in Vegas. And I really hope he does, because if he doesn't, I don't want another sprint race Qatar championship win. I don't know if you remember that, but that's where he won his second championship, was the sprint race in Qatar or whatever. It's just
so stupid.
Like Max didn't even know he won, and like someone came over and was like, "Hey, you're WDC," and he's like, "What? Oh, okay." So.
Yeah. Well, we got a bit of a break. The next race is going to be on the 23rd. Yeah,
it's the third summer break of the year so far.
Yeah, So we're going to be back in Vegas. I'm actually really excited for the Vegas race just right before Thanksgiving. So I'm really looking forward to it. We'll have some time to decompress during the holidays, and then from there, there's going to be another break. Oh no, actually no, we go right back
It's a
into
triple header, I think, at the end of the
yeah,
year.
yeah. We're going to Qatar, and then we'll finally finish. Yeah, we'll finish up in Abu Dhabi. I mean, the season is coming to an end. I think the the narrative that the FIA wanted to kind of create around Orlando, Max, uh, 1, 2, or vying for the chip is kind of going to the wayside, especially around this race. But who knows? Maybe there's ground that Lando can make up across the next 3 races. Although I highly doubt it.
Yeah, I mean, I think if Max finishes ahead of Lando, he clinches the championship. Um, and if Max wins, it's just automatic. So I really want him to clinch it in Vegas. I'm excited for it. I think it's going to be a great race, and I ultimately don't think it's going to be on the calendar for too much longer. I know they have a quasi 10-year deal, but I think it's a 3-year deal with the option to extend it to 10. And there's already rumors about them moving it or changing it. So the race was unexpectedly more interesting and good last year than I expected it to be. So I'm excited to watch it. I think Ferrari will be strong again. And I think whatever happened to Lando in this race is going to mentally get to him enough where he's going to not perform to his best capabilities in Vegas. And I think Max will. So I fully expect Max
Yeah.
to clinch it. So
I mean, I'd love to see a race in South Africa or in India again. So if Vegas loses this slot, I think so. I think there maybe, and this is the last thing I'll say. So I was in Vegas a couple of months ago for a work conference, and one of the interesting things that the Uber driver said, swore a lot, but he was just like, man, they shut down all these roads during the F1 race, like maybe a week or two before the race even happens. Like you can, as a Vegas native, you can feel the impact of kind of the streets shutting down and them putting up barriers. Like I think that all points to Vegas being a much more expensive kind of venue for the for F1 to maybe afford. Just kind of shutting down all those businesses. Like you got to make it make sense financially, and I think Vegas might actually lose. So I don't really know the numbers around it, and they keep that pretty guarded. But I think there's a potential for Vegas to potentially lose money, like as a city of Vegas, right? Especially since you're doing it on the strip, and that other businesses like smaller businesses that are not the big casinos, they're probably going to be impacted by it the most. So I can definitely see Vegas if they were to re up on their contract after the 3 year period, they might even ask for more money for that to be able to block off that section of Vegas. Um, that's just me kind of thinking out loud based on kind of what that foul mouthed Uber driver was saying to me. But
I think the first year there was a lot of reports saying that Vegas had their best weekend ever, but that was the first year. There was a lot of press, there was a lot of hype, a lot of big wig corporate people coming in, and it was kind of insanity logistically. There was a lot going on. There's probably a lot of gambling and so on and so forth. But there's already rumors and whispers that they're having trouble selling tickets this year. I mean, there's a Lewis Hamilton package where you're like in a grandstand, 3-day ticket. You get like some Lewis Hamilton merch and gear with them, and it's like $670. Like that's a 3-day ticket in Vegas in a bleacher with some added bonuses for not that much money, like relative to what some of these tickets were last year. So like they're obviously having a little bit of trouble, and the city of Vegas, the locals, the people were kind of against it. I think it would have been better if they announced this like strip Vegas race like once a decade, like every 10 years have like a Vegas,
or just
big.
build a track like somewhere else in like near Vegas, like it's Nevada, it's a goddamn desert. Like I don't
Yeah,
like if they did the 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 Austin race, like near the city of Austin, that would not fly. Like I think too many people in the city of Austin would be like, nope, like we're not doing that. They built Coda right outside the airport, so like it makes perfect sense. You're still close enough. Remember, Chris, us going to Coda, like to get there and back, the traffic was insane. Same thing happened this year, and I can't even imagine what that looks like on a Vegas strip. Like if you have a hotel that's outside the strip, it's probably going to take you like hours and hundreds of dollars to get an Uber to get the fuck out of there. Um, so I don't know. Yeah, I think bringing that race in like maybe once every couple of years would be a much more manageable cadence. But I just don't see this being a tenable kind of race for back to back to back years.
Yeah, I think it's going to be difficult, but that's the reason why I want to go. If I don't think I can manage it logistically because it's only in a couple of weeks, but maybe next year would be a great opportunity because it might be the last. So I want to go see it at least once. That being said, I'm excited for it. I think it's going to be the last like really great race of the season, just because I think a lot of these championships are going to be clenched there. We'll see how the constructors sort of lands between, maybe if Sergio is able to get his Dukes out, maybe they can close the gap and, fight for second or first again in constructors. We'll see what happens. But
Yeah,
ultimately,
or Ferrari can just pull some magic out their butt and clinch it themselves.
I
I've seen,
would I would much prefer that to happen. And I have high hopes for a Ferrari double podium in Vegas. So hopefully that will happen. Oscar's been a little bit deflated from the papaya rules and not performing to his capabilities. Maybe he just wants to stay away from Lando so he doesn't have to swap positions. But
yeah,
yeah, I'm excited.
yeah.
Sao
What's it
Paulo
like?
was great.
Like a 36 points separating McLaren and Ferrari right now.
Yeah,
Um,
that's a race.
it's
Like they can
that's
do
yeah,
it, and
that's totally doable.
100%. And I kind of hope that they do show them a little lesson, and it'll be the first time that third place, I think, in the constructors won the WDC. This is what a wacky year all around, but it's been exciting. It's been great. This race was obviously one for the record books, and excited for Vegas. See, but unfortunately, we have this third summer break to get through first.
Yeah. Well, we'll be back after Vegas. Until then, bye everybody.
Thank you for listening. Shayem and I would love for you to join the Fan Team Radio community. So please like, subscribe, or follow on your platform of choice, and we'll see you next time.